All right, so today we are harvesting some of our cabbages. This is the first year we have ever grown these, and this was a crop that Logan picked out. He wanted to try. We generally try to do one new crop every year just to see if we like it and how it goes. And since our family has started loving homemade sauerkraut, cabbage just seemed like a perfect vegetable for us to go ahead and grow. Cabbage is a cool weather crop, so it has been loving the spring that we've had here in Georgia, but things are starting to heat up and we've been noticing that some of these look big enough to pick. These are a Wakefield cabbage. They were recommended as good for hot weather or just warmer climates in general. They don't need to be in the super chill or like the northern climates. So that's why we tried this variety, and I will tell you, I've been incredibly happy. We have kept these covered with netting to get rid of cabbage worms and try to prevent some bugs. And I will even say the cabbages that we did not cover because we had too many that I didn't have enough netting, even those have fared really well. So I would definitely recommend this variety if you are in the South. It has grown well. It has taken very little effort. Once they got established, we just kept them watered and under the net and they were fine. So today we are going to harvest 2 of them so that we can have some for dinner and then also so we can make some homemade sauerkraut. So I'm going to take you along on that journey in a little bit, but first let's get these harvested. Well, let's try to get these harvested. Okay. Whew. Okay, so this is the cabbage. Once you can see here, it grows on this stalk. And while the netting has done a great job of keeping the cabbage moths from laying eggs, you can see here, we still get some friends. Nothing is completely bug proof. So I'm actually going to trim off all of these leaves. These will go to the chickens. There really is nothing wrong with them. You can eat them. But just because they've been bug eaten and they're, you know, dirty and stuff, I'm just not even going to worry about it. Oh, they're easier to break off, by the way. Okay, so this is about what I'm gonna keep. I might break these leaves off too. But this is essentially the head of cabbage that you would get in the grocery store. You would typically find that they would cut the stem off there. So I'm gonna take this guy inside and we are going to do some homemade sauerkraut and show you guys how easy it is to make. So now that I have washed and drained my cabbage, I am ready to make sauerkraut. Now, I ferment my sauerkraut. I use the lacto fermentation process, which basically is very simple, and it's just using the cabbage's own juices and salt. It does take a little while to get started, but as you'll see here, once the juices start to come out of the cabbage, it moves along pretty quickly. Fermenting is an easy way to preserve food, but it also gives you a lot of gut health benefits. And sauerkraut is one of those things that I will not eat from the store. I've tried canned sauerkraut, I've tried the frozen stuff, I've tried the stuff that's packaged in the produce section. My kids don't like it, I don't like it. My husband likes it, but he kind of eats anything, so we can't really go based on his taste. But fresh sauerkraut is one of those things that is totally different. It really is a game changer, and it's a good introduction into fermented foods if that's not something that you particularly have a taste for. And then other nice thing about making it yourself is you can decide how sour you want it to be. Kevin does not like it when it's super strong and sour, so I usually make him a separate jar of just his own that I ferment for less time so that the flavor isn't as strong. And then for the rest of us, I'll ferment it a little bit longer so that you can get the full flavor. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to slice my cabbage up really thin. You can see here that I still have the stem on from where I harvested it. So I'm just going to cut through that. That will go to the chickens or the compost. And then I'm going to just pull off some of these outer leaves just to make sure this still has a little bit of water in it from where I soaked it, but that's okay. Okay. So when you're cutting your cabbage for sauerkraut, you don't want to use this center part because it's just really tough and it doesn't soften up very well. So what I usually do is I just cut around it to get like my wedges of cabbage. And I'll do that with the other half too. And then I flip it over, and I like to cut my cabbage super thin. I think it works better, it's easier. It kind of speeds the process up of getting the juices to come out. So I cut it as thin as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing that. Now that I have my cabbage is all cut, I am going to start working with about half of it. I have learned over the different times that I've made this that this process tends to get a little messy because you're working with the cabbage and it sort of tends to fly out of the bowl all the time. So I have learned that it's actually better to work with about a half a head at a time so that you have room to manipulate the cabbage and not have it act like confetti all over your kitchen. So I have about half of a shredded cabbage here, or cut thinly. And I'm going to add some salt. We use the Redmond's salt. I find that it doesn't have any extra stuff in it, and it also just works really well. It lasts us for forever. And I'm starting with about a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. The amount of salt that you want to use is dependent on two things. One, you want to make sure that you're using enough that you can actually extract liquid out of the cabbage. But two, you also are going to salt it to taste. And so as I am working with this cabbage, I may end up adding more as I either get enough liquid or I don't get enough liquid, or once I add the rest of the other half of the head of cabbage. But once you get that salt in there, you're just going to work your cabbage. That is all you're doing. You're kind of pressing that salt into the cabbage and you're getting it to release its juices. And this is the part that takes a little while to get it started. So I usually kind of work for about 10 minutes and then I'll go do something else and then I'll come back and work it a little bit more. But you can already see a difference just in the few minutes that I've been talking to you, how much it's wilted. You can see this is the salted cabbage and then this is the fresh cabbage. So it's already starting to soften just with what I have done. So I'm going to continue to work on this and then add in some other cabbage as this softens so that I can get my entire batch finished. So you can see here after I have massaged it for a little bit, how it's starting to release. This is all the juice that you want. This means that I have a good amount of salt in there. It's starting to let go some of those juices and create its own brine. And that is what you're looking for. So you're just gonna keep squeezing and kind of getting everything mixed in and mooshed together. So just keep going. So I'm just gonna add the last of this cabbage now. You can see here I have this. It is definitely starting to break down. I just tasted it and it was pretty salty. So I'm not going to add any salt to this batch here or this addition of the cabbage here unless I find that it's not breaking down. But I'm going to make sure that I get all this kind of tossed together, and I will let this sit for a few minutes and then I will start working on squeezing it and getting the salt into that. And then at that point I can test my salt again and see, do I need to add more or how does it taste? So I'm just going to let this sit for about 5 minutes and then I will keep working this until it is soft and broken down like the beginning batch. Okay, so now that this has softened up and wilted, I have lots of liquid in the bottom. I'm going to pack it into, I have a 1/2 gallon jar right here. And I don't think this is gonna fill up the whole jar, but we're gonna see how far we can get to. Usually when I make sauerkraut, like I said earlier, I will make either a pint jar or a quart jar for Kevin because he likes his less sour. He currently has plenty of sauerkraut that I've already made. So this is just gonna go all in the one jar. And I'm just gonna do like a bulk batch today, I guess. All right, and the magic is trying to get it all in the jar and not all over the counter. Okay, so you can see here, this filled up about half of my jar, and once I compress it to let it ferment, it's going to go ahead and go down even further. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna cut another cabbage and repeat the same process so that I can get my jar full, and then I will show you how we are going to let this ferment on the counter. Okay, so I have all of my cabbage. It is wilted, it is down, and you can already see the amount of liquid that is in this jar. So what I want to do is I need all of this cabbage to be completely submerged in liquid. That's how we are going to get the fermentation process going, but also keep it from molding or having any bad bacteria start breeding in there. The easiest way I found to do this is to use this handy little setup. This is a fermentation lid, and then this is what you use to push your item down so that it stays under the brine. There are a few different kits out there that you can buy. This one is made by Ball. I have no affiliation with them. I just use their products. But I find that this one's easiest because it comes with the lid. This allows any extra gases to escape without your jar exploding. You can't seal it off completely while it is fermenting because it has the potential to explode. So this goes down in your jar. And when you put the lid on, it pushes down. And if you have enough liquid, it allows your liquid level to rise up and it keeps all of your food underneath submerged. Since I do not have enough liquid and I tasted my cabbage and it's a little saltier than what I normally do, I am actually going to add a little bit of water to this. Adding a little bit here and there is fine. You don't want to completely fill this up with water because you're going to dilute your solution and it will take a lot longer for it to ferment and it may not even properly ferment anyways. So I'm doing just enough water so that when I put my lid on, it holds everything underneath. So, and you can see here, I have some little pieces of cabbage that are stuck up here. I'm gonna go ahead after this video, I'm gonna push them down because I don't want anything up here where it could potentially spoil. Once you get your lid on, you get your weight in here, everything's covered, you wanna leave it on your counter. Usually for Kevin's sauerkraut, which is less sour, I leave it about 4 to 5 days. I'll test it every few days just to kind of check the flavor. I'll have him taste it and tell me what he likes. With these bigger jars and for a more sour sauerkraut, I leave it at least 7 days. Sometimes I'll go 9 days, but usually 7 days for us is about the flavor that we want it to be at. And then once it reaches its desired flavor, I will take the fermentation stuff off of it. I will put a regular lid on it and I will put it in my refrigerator. And it just stays there indefinitely. The refrigeration process definitely slows down any further fermenting, but the longer it stays in there, of course, it is going to continue to ferment slowly. Sort of like sourdough, bread dough will rise in the fridge. It will just take a little bit longer. So I get it close to where we want it, and then I go ahead and swap out the lids, put it in the refrigerator, and leave it there until we eat it. Since this is the first year we have grown our own cabbage, I plan on turning almost all of it into sauerkraut. You can absolutely do this with store-bought cabbage. The only downside that I find is because those cabbages have been sitting in the grocery store, they have started to dry out slightly. So when you're using a store-bought cabbage, you may find that you actually do have to add a little bit of water or even a little bit of salt water to make sure that your cabbage is covered under the top of the jar there. Because these cabbages were fresh, they were picked yesterday, they still had quite a bit of water still in the leaves. So I just had to add that very little bit. But this will be ready in about a week for us to enjoy. And I hope you guys try this. This is something that was a little scary for me at the beginning. However, once I tried it the first time, and I was hooked after that. We eat sauerkraut with quite a few of our meals. It's even just kind of a good snack, especially in the summertime when you're sweating. That salt adds back some electrolytes, almost like people would do like a dill pickle. But the salt adds back those electrolytes, so it's good to come in and have a couple forkfuls, drink some water, and then get your system back into balance. And then, of course, you have the fermenting benefits of adding that good bacteria. It almost becomes a natural probiotic. So instead of buying probiotics where your bacteria has been freeze-dried and it's hard to guarantee its activeness, then this is clearly active because it's been fermenting, it's here, it's fine, you know? So good luck making sauerkraut, and we'll see you on the next video.